241 of 31st July 1997. Please take your seat. I now give the floor to the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres. Please, could you take your seats?
Let me begin with two words we have not been able to say often enough in this hall. Madam President. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, 8 years ago, in a world scorched by war, leaders made a choice: cooperation over chaos, law over lawlessness, peace over conflict. And that choice gave birth to the United Nations, not as a dream for perfection, but as a practical strategy for the survival of humanity. Many of our founders had seen firsthand the hell of the death camps and the terror of war. They knew that true leadership meant creating a system to prevent a replay of those horrors, a firewall against the flames of conflict and World War III, a forum for sovereign states to pursue dialogue and cooperation, and a concrete affirmation of an essential human truth: we are all in this together. And this General Assembly Hall is the heartbeat of that truth. It is why for decades world leaders have come to this one-of-a-kind podium. It is why you are here today. Because at its best, the United Nations is more than a meeting place. It's a moral compass, a force for peace and peacekeeping, a guardian of international law, a catalyst for sustainable development, a lifeline for people in crisis, a lighthouse for human rights, and a center that transforms your decisions, the decisions of member states, into action. 80 years on, we confront again the question our founders faced, only more urgent, more intertwined, more unforgiving. What kind of world do we choose to build together? Excellencies, we have our work cut out for us, as our ability to carry out that work is being cut from us. We have entered in an age of reckless disruption and relentless human suffering. Look around. The principles of the United Nations that you have established are under siege. Listen, the pillars of peace and progress are buckling under the weight of impunity, inequality, and indifference. Sovereign nations invaded, hunger weaponized, truth silence, rising smoke from bombed-out cities, rising anger in fractured societies, rising seas swallowing coastlines. Each one a warning, each one a question: what kind of world will we choose? A world of raw power or a world of laws? A world that is a scramble for self-interest or a world where nations come together? A world where might makes right or a world of rights for all? Excellencies, our world is becoming increasingly multipolar, and this is positive, reflecting a more diverse, dynamic global landscape. But multipolarity without effective multilateral institutions can court chaos, as Europe has learned the hard way, resulting in World War I. It was multipolar, but there was no multilateral institutions. So let's be clear. International cooperation is not naivete. It is hard-headed pragmatism. In a world where there's leap borders, isolation is an illusion. No country can stop a pandemic alone. No army can halt rising temperatures. No algorithm can rebuild trust once it is broken. These are global stress tests of our system, our solidarity, and our resolve. I'm convinced we can pass these tests, and we must. Because people everywhere are demanding something better, and we owe them a system worthy of their trust and a future worthy of their dreams. And so we must make the choice, an active choice, to reaffirm the imperative of international law, to reassert the centrality of multilateralism, to reinforce justice and human rights, and to recommit to the principles that gave rise to our organization, and to the promise contained in its first words, we the peoples. Excellencies, the choices we face are not part of an ideological debate. They are a matter of life and death for millions. As I scan the global landscape, we must make 5 critical choices. First, we must choose peace rooted in international law. Peace is our first obligation. Yet today, wars rage with a barbarity we vowed never to allow. Too often, the Charter is brandished when convenient and trampled when not. But the Charter is not optional. It is our foundation. And when the foundation cracks, everything built upon fractures. Around the world, we see countries acting as if the rules don't apply to them. We see humans treated as less than human, and we must call it out. Impunity is the mother of chaos, and it has spawned some of the most atrocious conflicts of our times. In Sudan, civilians are being slaughtered, starved, and silenced. Women and girls face unspeakable violence. There is no military solution. I urge all parties, including those in this hall, end the external support that is fueling this bloodshed. Push to protect civilians, because the Sudanese people deserve peace, dignity, and hope. In Ukraine, relentless violence continues to kill civilians, destroy civilian infrastructure, and threaten global peace and security. I commend recent diplomatic efforts by the United States and others. We must work for a full ceasefire and a just, lasting peace in accordance with the Charter, UN resolutions, and international law. In Gaza, the horrors are approaching a third monstrous year. They are the result of decisions that defy basic humanity. The scale of death and destruction are beyond any other conflict in my years as Secretary General. The International Court of Justice has issued legally binding provisional measures in the case named Application of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in the Gaza Strip. Since then, a famine has been declared and the killing has intensified. The measures stipulated by the ICJ must be implemented fully and immediately. Nothing can justify the horrific Hamas terror attacks of October 7 and the taking of hostages, both of which I have repeatedly condemned. And nothing can justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people and the systematic destruction of Gaza. We know what is needed: permanent ceasefire now. All the hostages released now. Full humanitarian access now. And we must not relent in the only viable answer to sustainable Middle East peace, a two-state solution as so eloquently reaffirmed yesterday. We must urgently reverse dangerous trends on the ground. Relentless settler expansion and violence, and the looming threat of annexation must stop. Everywhere, from Haiti to Yemen, to Myanmar and the Sahel and beyond, we must choose peace anchored in international law. The past year has brought glimmers of hope, including the ceasefire between Cambodia and Thailand, and the agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia brokered by the United States. But far too many crises continue unchecked. Impunity prevails, lawlessness is a contagion, it invites mayhem, accelerates terror, and risks a nuclear free-for-all. When accountability shrinks, graveyards grow. When UN staff and facilities are attacked, violating legal obligations, so too is the core of our ability to serve and deliver. The Security Council must live up to its responsibilities. It must be more representative, more transparent, and more effective. And beyond crisis response, we must tackle the injustices that ignite conflict: exclusion, inequality, impunity, and corruption. The surest way to silence the guns is to raise the volume for justice. Real security is born of fairness and opportunity for all.
Excellencies, this leads me to my second point. We must choose human dignity and human rights. Human rights are not an ornament of peace, they're its bedrock. Human rights, economic, social, cultural, political, and civil, are universal, indivisible, and interdependent. Choosing rights means more than words. It means choosing justice over silence. It means protecting freedom and civic space, advancing equality for women and girls, confronting racism and discrimination in all its forms, protecting human rights defenders, journalists, and freedom of speech, and upholding the rights of refugees and migrants so that mobility is safe and in accordance with international law. Human rights are a daily battle, online and offline. They require political will. But dignity is not only about the protection of rights. It is about rights fulfilled through inclusive and resilient development. Rights that put an end to poverty and hunger. Rights that open doors to education, health, and opportunity. The Sustainable Development Goals are our shared roadmap for achieving these rights. But in order to make progress down this road, we need fuel. And that fuel is finance. We've seen what development done right can deliver. In the past decade, millions more have gained access to electricity, clean cooking solutions, and to the internet. Child marriage is in retreat. Women's representation is growing, but cuts to aid are wreaking havoc. They are a death sentence for many. For so many more, a stolen future. This is the great paradox of our time. We have the solutions, but we are siphoning off the fuel that would make it possible to make progress. To choose dignity, we must choose financial justice and solidarity. We need to reform the international financial architecture so that it drives development for all. With bigger and bolder multilateral development banks, lending more, and mobilizing more private capital for developing countries, with faster and fairer debt relief mechanisms, helping every country in crisis, including middle-income countries. Protecting natural resources by tackling illicit financial flows and abusive tax practices that rob societies of their future. And global financial institutions that represent today's world, with far greater participation of developing countries in terms of their composition and their decision-making. So let us choose a global economy that works for everyone, men and women. Let us choose human rights and dignity. And let us equip ourselves with the means to ensure a transition for people and the planet. Excellencies, this brings me to the third choice. We must choose climate justice. The climate crisis is accelerating, but so are the solutions. The clean energy future is no longer a distant promise. It's already here. No government, industry, or special interest can stop it. But some are trying, hurting economies, locking in higher prices, and squandering a historic opportunity.
Fossil fuels are a losing bet. Last year, almost all new power capacity came from renewables, and the investment is surging. Renewables are the cheapest and fastest source of new power. They create jobs, drive growth, shield economies from volatile oil and gas markets, connect the unconnected, and can free us from the tyranny of fossil fuels. But not at today's pace. Clean energy investment remains uneven. 21st century grids and storage are not rolling out fast enough. And public subsidies, taking from taxpayer money, still flow to fossil fuels over clean energy by a factor of 9 to 1. Meanwhile, emissions, temperatures, and disasters keep rising. And those least responsible suffer the most. Science says limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees by the end of this century is still possible, but the window is closing. The International Court of Justice has affirmed the legal obligation of states. We must step up action and ambition, especially through strengthened national climate plans. Tomorrow, I will welcome leaders to announce new targets. The G20, the biggest emitters, must lead, guided by common but differentiated responsibilities. But all countries must step up and do more as we head to the UN Climate Conference in Brazil. By accelerating action in energy, forests, methane, and industrial decarbonization. By defining a credible roadmap to mobilize $1.3 trillion annually in climate finance by 2035 for developing countries. By supporting just transitions, by doubling finance for adaptation to at least $40 billion this year, and rapidly deploying proven tools to unlock billions more in concessional finance. And by capitalizing the Loss and Damage Fund with significant contributions. All of these requires government, international financial institutions, philanthropies, civil society, and the private sector to work together, to provide fiscal space to developing countries and unlock new innovative sources of finance at scale, including solidarity levies on high-emitting sectors and debt swaps. We have the solutions and tools, but we must choose climate justice and climate action. Fourth, we must choose to put technology at the service of humanity. Artificial intelligence is rewriting human existence in real time, transforming how we learn, work, communicate, and what we can trust. And the question is not how to stop it, but how to steer it for the greater good. Technology must be our servant, not our master. It must promote human rights, human dignity, and human agency. Yet today, AI's advancement in outpacing regulation and responsibility and is concentrated in a few hands. And the risks are expanding to new frontiers, from biotech to autonomous weapons. We are witnessing the rise of tools for mass surveillance, mass social control, mass disruption, and even mass destruction. Tools that can drain energy, strain ecosystems, and intensify the race for critical minerals, potentially stoking instability and conflict. Yet, these technologies remain largely ungoverned. We need universal guardrails and common standards across platforms. No company should be above the law. No machines should decide who lives or dies. No system should be deployed without transparency, safety, and accountability. Last month, this Assembly took a historic step, establishing an independent international scientific panel on AI and an annual global dialogue on AI governance. Two new pillars of a shared architecture, connecting science with policy to bring clarity and foresight, enabling innovation to flourish while advancing our values and our rights, and ensuring governments, companies, and civil society can help shape common norms. We must build on these mechanisms and close the capacity gap. All countries must be able to design and develop AI, not just to consume it. I have proposed voluntary financing options to build AI computing power, data, and skills in developing nations. No country should be locked out of the digital future or locked into systems it cannot shape or trust. And governments must lead with vision, and companies must act with responsibility. And we, the international community, must ensure that technology lifts up humanity. So let us choose cooperation over fragmentation, ethics over expediency, and transparency over opacity. Technology will not wait for us, but we can still choose what it serves. So let us choose wisely. Fifth and finally, to meet all these goals, we must choose to strengthen the United Nations for the 21st century. The forces shaking our world are also testing the foundations of the United Nations system. We are being hit by rising geopolitical tensions and divisions, chronic uncertainty, and mounting financial strain. But those who depend on the United Nations must not be made to bear the cost, especially now, when for every dollar invested to support our core work to build peace, the world spends $750 on weapons of war. This is not only unsustainable, it is indefensible. In this moment of crisis, the United Nations has never been more essential. The world needs our unique legitimacy, our convening power, our vision to unite nations, to bridge divides and confront the challenges before us. The Pact for the Future has shown your determination to build a United Nations that is stronger, more inclusive, and more effective. That is the logic and the urgency of our UN80 initiative. We are moving swiftly and decisively. I put forward concrete proposals, a revised budget for 2026 that strengthens accountability, improves delivery, and cuts costs. Practical reforms to implement mandates more effectively and efficiently with greater impact. And ideas to spark a paradigm shift in the structure of the UN and how its parts work together. Most of these decisions rest with you, the Member States, and we will move forward in full respect of the established procedures. Together, let us choose to invest in a United Nations that adapts, innovates, and is empowered to deliver for people everywhere. Excellencies, my overriding message comes down to this. Now is the time to choose. It's not enough to know what the right choices are. I urge you to make them. I grew up in a world where choices were few. I was raised in the darkness of dictatorship, where fear silenced voices and hope was nearly crushed. Yet, even the bleakest hours, especially then, I discovered a truth that has never left me. Power does not reside in the hands of those who dominate or divide. Real power resides from people, from our shared resolve to uphold dignity, to defend equality, to believe fiercely in our common humanity and the potential of every human being. I learned early to persevere, to speak out, to refuse to surrender, no matter the challenge, no matter the obstacle, no matter the hour. We must and we will overcome. Because in a world of many choices, there is one choice we must never make, the choice to give up. We must never give up. That is my promise to you, for peace, for dignity, for justice, for humanity, for the world we know is possible when we work as one. I will never, ever give up. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary General. The Assembly will now turn to agenda item 8, entitled General Debate. "80 years. Longer than the average human life. This anniversary of the United Nations should have been a moment of celebration. But this is not an ordinary year. Just look at the state of our world, as the Secretary General described. Thousands of orphans in Gaza are wandering around the rubble, eating sand, drinking contaminated water. 90-year-old women in Ukraine are hiding from drones, trapped in their homes instead of living their final years in peace. Children in Haiti, too afraid to walk to school, afraid they might be gunned down by gangs like their friends. And for every conflict and tragedy that seizes the headlines, there are so many more that are forgotten, lost to the news cycle. Like women in Democratic Republic of the Congo, shielding their daughters from armed groups, fearful they might be raped. And Rohingya children, spending their whole childhood in tattered tents, unable to remember what their home looks like. Faced with these realities, now is not the time to celebrate, but to ask ourselves, where is the United Nations? Distinguished heads of state and government, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, people out there in the world watching us. Clearly, we have to do better. But what we should not let cynics allow to weaponize these failures, to argue that our institution is a waste of money, outdated, irrelevant. When the principles of the Charter are ignored, Is it the UN that has failed? When tanks rolled into Ukraine, was it because Article 2 of the Charter is not clear enough about sovereignty and territorial integrity? When civilians, children, are killed in Gaza, is it humanitarian law at fault for failing to protect them? It's not the Charter which fails. It's not the UN as an institution which fails. The Charter, our Charter, is only as strong as member states' willingness to uphold it, and their willingness to hold to account those who violate it. Excellencies, yes, our world is in pain. Yes, we have failures. But imagine how much worse would it be without the United Nations? Would a single person be better off without it? Without UNICEF, 26 million children would not have received an education. Without the World Food Programme, nearly 125 million people would have lacked life-saving food assistance. Without the World Health Organization, over 1 billion vaccines would not have been supplied. Sometimes we could have done more, but we cannot let this dishearten us. If we stop doing the right thing, evil would prevail. This 80th session is not about big celebrations. It's about finding the resolve not to give up, the resolve to be better together, just as our predecessors did 8 decades ago. This institution was born in a world on fire and desperate for reprieve. 750 million, nearly a third of humanity back then, still under colonial rule. 2 world wars in a generation, 70 million dead. The horrors of the Holocaust revealed to our collective shame. This was a generation that knew almost nothing but suffering and despair. The signing of the Charter in 1945 gave hope to millions, gave us a North Star that guided our path from the ashes of war, helped guide nations from colonial rule into independent states, helped end apartheid. Across the decades, the United Nations has been a compass pointing toward peace, humanity, and justice. We have not always succeeded, but the story of this institution is not a story of easy victories. It's a story of falling and rising, of pulling ourselves and each other back up and trying harder. We gather here for the 80th time, not for empty celebration, not out of ritual, not to hear our own voices. We gather to prove that this institution matters, and that through this institution, every nation represented here, no matter how big or small, can summon again the strength and unity first shown in San Francisco 80 years ago. The courage and resolve of world leaders who, even while some called them back then naive, believed they could build a better world from the wreckage of the old. They showed then what true leadership is. It's not about imposing your will or putting others down. True leadership is about lifting others up, not out of altruism, but for our mutual benefit, and even out of our self-interest. Because as our founders and every architect of peace since then has understood, helping others is what makes ultimately our own countries stronger. Could any state have faced the global pandemic alone? The virus did not have any passport. We were only able to solve it at the end with the support of the World Health Organization. The climate crisis does not stop at borders. CO2 emissions anywhere affect people everywhere. Even the wealthiest cities in the world cannot shield themselves from wildfires. And imagine coming here by plane, how safe would you feel to step into the next airplane if there were no International Civil Aviation Organization anymore, which is responsible for setting safety regulations for 5 billion passengers each year? How comfortable would you be with your children using the internet while AI is uncontrolled and unchecked, as the lines between what is real and fake start to blur? In this globalized, digitalized world, we work together or we suffer alone. Excellencies, the theme of this milestone session and the high-level week is therefore Better Together. 80 years and more for peace, development, and human rights. Will living up to that be easy? No. But this hall was not built for easy times. It was built to come together to confront the hardest topics. This session is a session where the high-level week is about resolving differences. We showed some of it yesterday already. But even the House of Dialogue and Diplomacy needs a renovation. That is why the UN80 initiative and the wider reform process are not luxuries, but necessities. We are literally now at a crossroads, a make it or break it moment, politically, financially. Therefore, we have to deliver a United Nations that is agile, cost-effective, and fit for purpose. Member States have to give the Secretary General and this process their full support, because reform cannot stop in New York. It must carry through to every capital. That includes delivering the Pact for the Future and accelerating progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. Again, this is not about charity. It's about addressing the core purposes of this institution, about strengthening our foundations across all 3 pillars: peace and security, human rights, and sustainable development. They are inseparable. Leaving hundreds of millions trapped in extreme poverty, vulnerable to crisis, and denied their human rights is not only a moral failure, it's a recipe for global unrest, terrorism, and a tragic waste of humanity's greatest resource, its people. Put it simply, without the SDGs, there cannot be lasting peace. Excellencies, our future as an institution will also be shaped by the selection of the next Secretary General. And here we must pause and reflect. In nearly 80 years, this organization has never chosen a woman for that role. One might wonder how out of 4 billion potential candidates, there could not be found a single one. Of course, the choice rests with member states. But those of you having been there yesterday celebrating Beijing, one strong female leader after the other from all our continents. Like 80 years ago, we are standing at a crossroads. And it's up to us, to every single member state, to live up to the same leadership as your predecessors did. To act when action is needed. To uphold the principles of our Charter. To be better together. To show the people around the world that this United Nation is there. today, tomorrow, and for the next 8 decades. Because, after all, it's the life insurance for every country. Before giving the floor to the first speaker for this morning, I would like to remind Member States that the list of speakers for the general debate has been established on the agreed basis that statements should be no longer than 15 minutes to enable all the speakers to be heard at a given meeting. Within this time frame, I would like to appeal to speakers to deliver their statements at a reasonable pace so that interpretation into the other official languages may be provided properly. I would also like to draw your attention to the decision taken by the Assembly at previous sessions, namely that the practice of expressing congratulations inside the Assembly Hall after speech has been delivered is strongly discouraged. After delivering their statements from the rostrum, speakers are invited to exit the hall through room JA200, located behind the podium, before returning to their seats. May I take it that the Assembly agrees to proceed in this manner? It's so decided. Finally, I should like to draw the attention of Member States that during the general debate, official photographers are in the room and will take official photographs of all speakers by the Department of Global Communications. Members interested in obtaining these photographs are requested to contact the Photo Library of the United Nations. By this, the Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, President of the Federative Republic of Brazil. I request the protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Madam President of the General Assembly, Annalena Baerbock, Mr. Secretary General Antonio Guterres, dear heads of state and government, and representatives of the member states gathered here. This should be a time to celebrate the United Nations. Created at the end of the war, the UN symbolizes the highest expression of the aspiration for peace and prosperity. Today, however, the ideals that inspired its founders in San Francisco are under threat as never before in their history. Multilateralism is at a new crossroads. The organization's authority is in check. We are witnessing the consolidation of an international order marked by repeated concessions to power play, attacks on sovereignty, arbitrary sanctions, and unilateral interventions are becoming the rule. There is a clear parallel between the multilateralism crisis and the weakening of democracy. Authoritarianism is strengthened when we fail to act in the face of arbitrary acts, when the international society falters in defending peace, sovereignty, and the rule of law. The consequences are tragic. Throughout the world, anti-democratic forces are trying to subjugate institutions and stifle freedoms. They worship violence, praise ignorance, act as physical and digital militias, and restrict the press. Even under an unprecedented attack, Brazil chose to resist and defend its democracy, regained 40 years ago by its people after 2 decades of dictatorial governments. There is no justification for unilateral and arbitrary measures against our institutions and our economy. The aggression against the independence of the judiciary branch of power is unacceptable. This interference in domestic affairs is aided by a subservient far right who is nostalgic of past hegemonies. False patriots plan and publicly promote actions against Brazil. Peace cannot be achieved with impunity. A few days ago, and for the first time in 525 years of our history, a former head of state was convicted of attacking the democratic rule of law. He was investigated, indicted, trialed, and held accountable for his actions in a meticulous process. He has the right to defend himself was secured, a prerogative that dictatorships deny to their victims. Before the eyes of the world, Brazil sent a message to all aspiring autocrats and those who support them. Our democracy, our sovereignty are non-negotiable. We will continue as an independent nation and as a people free from any type of guardianship. Sound democracies go beyond the electoral ritual. Its strength presupposes the reduction of inequalities, the guarantee of the most food, safety, work, housing, education, and health. Democracy loses when it closes. Poverty is as much an enemy of democracy as extremism. Therefore, we were proud to receive confirmation from FAO that Brazil has once again
a confirmação de que o Brasil voltou a sair do mapa da fome este ano de 2025. Mas no mundo ainda há 670 milhões de pessoas famintas e cerca de 2 bilhões e 300 milhões enfrentam insegurança alimentar. A única guerra que todos podem sair vencedores é a que travamos contra a fome e a pobreza. Esse é o objetivo da Aliança Global que lançamos no G20 e que já conta com o apoio de 103 países. A comunidade internacional precisa rever suas prioridades, reduzir os gastos com guerras e aumentar a ajuda ao desenvolvimento, aliviar o serviço da dívida externa dos países mais pobres, sobretudo os africanos, e definir padrões mínimos de tributação global para que os super ricos paguem mais impostos que os trabalhadores. A democracia também se mede pela capacidade de proteger as famílias e a infância. As plataformas digitais trazem possibilidade de nos aproximar como jamais havíamos imaginado, mas têm sido usadas para semear intolerância, misoginia, xenofobia e desinformação. A internet não pode ser terra sem lei. Cabe ao poder público proteger os mais vulneráveis. Regular não é restringir a liberdade de expressão, é garantir que o que já é ilegal no mundo real seja tratado assim também no ambiente digital, no ambiente virtual. Ataques à regulação serve para encobrir interesses escusos e dar guarida a crimes como fraudes, tráfico de pessoas, pedofilia e investidas contra a democracia. O Parlamento brasileiro, corretamente, apressou-se em abordar esse problema. Com orgulho, promulguei na última semana uma das leis mais avançadas do mundo para a proteção de crianças e adolescentes na esfera digital. Também enviamos ao Congresso Nacional projeto de lei para fomentar a concorrência nos mercados digitais e para incentivar a instalação de data centers sustentáveis. Para mitigar os riscos da inteligência artificial, apostamos na construção de uma governança multilateral em linha com o Pacto Digital Global aprovado neste plenário o ano passado. Senhoras e senhores, na América Latina e Caribe, vivemos um momento de crescente polarização e instabilidade. Manter a região como zona de paz sempre foi e é a nossa prioridade. Somos um continente livre de armas de destruição em massa, sem conflitos étnicos ou religiosos. É preocupante a equiparação entre a criminalidade e o terrorismo. A forma mais eficaz de combater o tráfico de drogas é a cooperação para reprimir a lavagem de dinheiro e limitar o comércio de armas. Usar força letal em situações que não constituem conflitos armados equivale a executar pessoas sem julgamento. Outras partes do planeta já testemunharam intervenções que causaram danos maiores do que se pretendia evitar, com graves consequências humanitárias. A via do diálogo não deve estar fechada na Venezuela. O Haiti tem direito a um futuro livre de violência. E é inadmissível que Cuba seja listada como país que patrocina o terrorismo. No conflito na Ucrânia, todos já sabemos que não haverá solução militar. O recente encontro no Alasca despertou a esperança de uma saída negociada. É preciso pavimentar caminhos para uma solução realista. Isso implica levar em conta as legítimas preocupações de segurança de todas as partes. A Iniciativa Africana e o Grupo de Amigos da Paz, criado por China e Brasil, podem contribuir para promover o diálogo. Nenhuma situação é mais emblemática do que o uso desproporcional e ilegal da força do que a da Palestina. Os atentados terroristas perpetrados pelo Hamas são indefensáveis sob qualquer ângulo, mas nada, absolutamente nada, justifica o genocídio em curso em Gaza. Ali, sob toneladas de escombros, estão enterradas dezenas de milhares de mulheres e crianças inocentes. Ali também estão sepultados o direito internacional humanitário e o mito da superioridade ética do Ocidente. Este massacre não aconteceria sem a cumplicidade dos que poderiam evitá-lo. Em Gaza, fome é usado como arma de guerra e o deslocamento forçado de populações é praticado impunemente. Quero expressar minha admiração aos judeus que dentro e fora de Israel se opõem a essa punição coletiva. O povo palestino corre o risco de desaparecer. Só sobreviverá como um Estado independente integrado à comunidade internacional. Esta é a solução defendida por mais de 150 membros da ONU, reafirmada ontem aqui, neste mesmo plenário, mas obstruída por um único veto. É lamentável que o presidente Mahmoud Abbas tenha sido impedido pelo país anfitrião de ocupar a bancada da Palestina nesse momento histórico. O alastramento desse conflito para o Líbano para a Síria e o Irã e o Catar fomenta escalada armamentista sem precedentes. Senhoras presidentas, bombas e armas nucleares não vão nos proteger da crise climática. O ano de 2024 foi o mais quente já registrado. A COP30 em Belém, no Brasil, será a COP da verdade. Será o momento de os líderes mundiais provarem a seriedade de seu compromisso com o planeta. Sem ter o quadro completo das contribuições nacionalmente determinadas, as chamadas NDCs, caminharemos de olhos vendados para um verdadeiro abismo. O Brasil se comprometeu a reduzir entre 59% e 67% suas emissões, abrangendo todos os gases de efeito estufa em todos os setores da economia. Nações em desenvolvimento enfrentam a mudança do clima ao mesmo tempo em que lutam contra outros desafios. Enquanto isso, países ricos usufruem de padrão de vida obtido às custas de 200 anos de emissões de gases. Exigir maior ambição e maior acesso a recursos e tecnologias não é uma questão de caridade, é apenas uma questão de justiça. A corrida por minerais críticos essenciais para a transição energética não pode reproduzir a lógica predatória que marcou os últimos séculos. Em Belém, o mundo vai conhecer a realidade da Amazônia. O Brasil já reduziu pela metade o desmatamento na região nos 2 últimos anos. Erradicá-lo requer garantia, condições dignas de vida para seus milhões de habitantes. Fomentar o desenvolvimento sustentável é o objetivo do Fundo Florestas Tropicais para Sempre, que o Brasil pretende lançar para remunerar os países que mantêm suas florestas em pé. É chegado o momento de passar da fase da negociação para a etapa da implementação. O mundo deve muito ao regime criado pela Convenção do Clima, mas é necessário trazer o combate à mudança do clima para o coração da ONU para que ela tenha a atenção que merece. Um conselho vinculado à Assembleia Geral, com força e legitimidade para monitorar compromissos, dará coerência à ação climática. Trata-se de um passo fundamental na direção de uma reforma mais abrangente da organização, que contemple também um Conselho de Segurança ampliado nas 2 categorias de seus membros. Poucas áreas retrocederam tanto como o sistema multilateral de comércio. Medidas unilaterais transformam em letra morta princípios basilares como a cláusula de nação mais favorecida. Desorganizam cadeias de valor e lançam a economia mundial em uma espiral perniciosa de preços altos e estagnação. É urgente refundar a OMC em bases modernas e flexíveis. Senhoras e senhores, este ano o mundo perdeu 2 personalidades excepcionais. O ex-presidente do Uruguai, Pepe Mujica, e o nosso querido Papa Francisco. Ambos encarnaram como ninguém os melhores valores humanistas. Suas vidas se entrelaçaram com as 8 décadas de existência da ONU. Se ainda estivesse entre nós, provavelmente usariam esta tribuna para lembrar que o autoritarismo, a degradação ambiental e a desigualdade não são inexoráveis. Que os únicos derrotados são os que cruzam os braços resignados. Que podemos vencer os falsos profetas de oligarcas que exploram o medo e monetizam o ódio. E que o amanhã é feito de escolhas diárias e é preciso coragem de agir para transformá-lo. No futuro que o Brasil vislumbra, não há espaço para a reedição de rivalidades ideológicas ou esfera de influência. A confrontação é inevitável. Precisamos de lideranças com clareza de visão, que entendam que a ordem internacional não é um jogo de soma zero. O século XXI será cada vez mais multipolar. Para se manter pacífico, não pode deixar de ser multilateral. O Brasil confere crescente importância à União Europeia, à União Africana, à ASEAN, à CELAC, aos BRICS e ao G20. A voz do Sul global deve ser respeitada e ouvida. A ONU tem hoje quase 4 vezes mais membros do que os 51 que estiveram na sua fundação. Nossa missão histórica é a de torná-la novamente portadora de esperanças e promotora da igualdade e da paz, do desenvolvimento sustentável e da diversidade e da tolerância. Que Deus nos abençoe a todos e muito obrigado.
On behalf...
Nós acompanhamos ao vivo o discurso do presidente Lula na Assembleia Geral das Nações Unidas em Nova York.